Let's go.
You're listening to Making Data Simple, where we make the world of data effortless, relevant, and yes, even fun.
Hey, podcast listeners, Al Martin here. This is Making Data Simple. We talk about data, we talk about technology. Your host is kind of a simpleton, so that's how we get to simple. Outside of that, I bring the smartest people on the planet here to talk to you, and I've done that again today. It is getting cold out there. I don't know if you guys are like me, but man, I long for the heat. And now we got to not celebrate, daylight savings time. I hate daylight savings time. I don't know about you guys. I can't stand it. A gentleman by the name of George Hudson, he's an entomologist from New Zealand. He came up with the concept of daylight savings so he could have more hours to go bug hunting. So, thanks, George. I start my day in the dark and I end my day in the dark. So he could go bug hunting in 1895. Actually, I think the U.S. passed it in the World War I to conserve energy, but it never went away. Anyway, welcome to the beginning of winter. I am going to be a little bit of a homer today. I'm going to talk about IBM. However, I am talking with some non-IBM or some IBM champions. And this is a designation for some really important people. But two very different leaders. First one is Heather Cole. Heather is the president CFO of Lodestar Solutions, also an analytics advisor to executives and a professional speaker. And I'm also speaking with Stephen Perva, who's a senior mainframe innovation engineer at Ensono. Welcome, guys. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Am I the only one that hates daylight savings time?
I kind of like it, to be honest with you, because it's the one day of the year. Today is the day of the year that I actually wake up early.
All right. That one is tough to argue with. Heather, give me something better to make me feel good about daylight savings time.
Being that I live in the sunshine states, it doesn't impact us as much. You know, it's not like you people up north that get those long winter nights. Like, we get sunshine all the time. So I'm good either way.
Where are you located?
In Tampa, Florida.
Tampa, Florida. I'm in Kansas City, yeah. So I'm somewhere in the middle. I go to work in the dark and I come home in the dark. Where are you located, Stephen?
I'm in Chicago, Illinois. I think it's I always tell people time is fluid for me. So I just kind of let things be what they are. The calendar just is there and my day just kind of ebbs and flows.
You just sit in the dark all day, so it doesn't matter.
I try to, right? It's just like, let's just let the darkness be. This is the only time there's light in my room whenever I need to be on video.
Welcome, guys. I appreciate it. So I want to start off with your brand or your experience in the past that kind of brings you to today. Why don't we start with you, Heather? Why don't you go first?
Wow, that's pretty open considering how old I am. So how did I get here? I think life is a journey of, when you're a kid and your parents make you do something and you vow you'll never do it again. Well, working in the software industry was my thing. My parents had a software company when I was a young kid. My dad wrote one of the first software programs to track the futures market on a real-time basis. So I literally grew up in the world of data and analytics. And I vowed, I will never work in technology. Yeah, that didn't really work out well for me. Somehow that gravitational pull pulls you back. And so I've been in the world of data and analytics ever since.
Did you start the company that you now represent?
So, about 18 years ago, I had a boss that promised me something that they weren't willing to deliver. And you know how that goes. Take this job and, well, you know the rest of the song. And so I basically said, I'm gone. And I called my dad, who's always been an advisor to me. I said, I just quit my job and I'm starting my own firm. And this was a very long time ago. So you hear my dad clicking on the keyboard and said, what is your company name? I have your website set up and I'll have a whole webpage for you by Monday. So so it started it. And really, we're a boutique firm that really helps people leverage data and analytics in ways to help them accomplish their goals.
So why data? How'd you get into data?
I think that end of the day, I'm a numbers person, right? I always say my first language is binary, then hexadecimal, and then I can get into that English stuff. But being able to look at data, and I think that at the end of the day, data doesn't lie. It's people's interpretation of data that can lie. And so there's secrets in the data that when read properly can really help organizations serve the world in the ways they're intended to serve the world.
But can't you be creative when you're presenting the data? So while the data itself may not lie, you can lie with the data, perhaps?
Absolutely. And as I said, the truth is always hiding there. It's how people slant it. But when you do it with authenticity and really honor the data, let's say, then it doesn't lie. You can spin the story, but if you really boil it down, the truth is hiding in those numbers.
All right, my last question before I go to Stephen, then we'll kind of open it up. But your parents did software for futures. Is that what you said?
Yeah. So you know how if you've ever gone to the Chicago Board of Trade, or when you back in the day, if you went there, you'd go see the trading pits, and they'd be like buying and selling. It's like all chaos, and it used to not have computer systems to track all that. And so I remember in the 80s. So now I'm dating myself, being on the board of trade and in October, and the market crashed. So they literally wrote code that would take data from all these different data sources and give you bar charts and graphs on what was happening. And it kind of predicted what would happen next.
But you're still working. So the software was good, but it didn't make your parents billionaires? or where did it end?
Hey, I love what I do.
All right, so you're working because you want to. You don't have to. I got it. All right. That's very good. Well, unlike Stephen and I speak for myself. I'm working because I have to. Stephen, why don't you give us a little bit about your experience?
Sure. So I kind of came from this rural town in Illinois. So I'm in Chicago, like I had mentioned. I grew up in a small town called Kewanee, Illinois. Really interesting place. Went by the hog capital of the world, right? I see that Heather's kind of laughing and nodding. But that's kind of probably not the what you would anticipate is the technology hub of Illinois, exactly, right? So I grew up in a really interesting schooling environment. My dad worked for Hardee's, and my mother kind of was a nurse at the time. And I wasn't the most, and feel free to cut this out if you want, but I wasn't the most stellar student in school, right? So when I would come to class, we're going
to leave all of the bad stuff in. Don't worry about it. Keep going.
Okay, great. So I wasn't the most stellar student, and my math teachers kind of had a knack for identifying that I was more logically brained than anything. So as they noticed that I would be able to excel on exams, but not exactly in homework, they would kind of have these moments where they would mentor me, if you will. That's a soft way of describing how they would chide me for not doing my work. So one of my high school math teachers really impressed upon me something really fascinating. He was sick and tired of the homework collection time coming around and everyone turning in their homework except for Steve and Perva. And he was like, well, why aren't you doing your homework? And I said, I just have other things that I'm doing. I was working on computers at night, and I was staying up late building video game servers and stuff like that. It was really kind of my bread and butter. But he said to me, you should never come to class. You should never arrive somewhere unless you're fully prepared. And that really resonated with me for some reason. And when I went off to college, I was a very good college student. I did quite well in college. And I remember one day I hadn't finished, or I wasn't fully prepared for something in class. So I heard this voice in my head saying, if you're not prepared, you shouldn't even show up. So I went to school at Northern Illinois University, and they partner with IBM as part of kind of their Mainframe program. I think it was an academic initiative at the time. And I just happened to show up And this happened on the day that the Master the Mainframe contest had started at IBM. And instead of showing up to class unprepared and extremely late, I went to the computer lab because they had computer labs at the time. And I started on this Master the Mainframe program. And I just spent the whole day in the computer lab kind of whittling away at this. And it turned out to be pretty interesting and fun. And to make a short story long, what happened was, when they were talking about prizes, I didn't want to finish it because the prizes weren't appetizing to me. It was a trip to Poughkeepsie, New York, which I called Poughkeepsie at the time. And the other reward was a flat screen television. And I was a video gamer, didn't want anything to do with what I called, quote unquote, Poughkeepsie, New York. And turns out I did so well enough that somebody at Poughkeepsie noticed, and they called me and said, hey, we want you to work on mainframe stuff. So kind of all-time backfires. I thought it was a prank, and I kind of shelved them and said, yeah, I'll call you if I'm interested. It was real. I ended up moving my entire life to Poughkeepsie, New York, and I stayed there for a few years working for IBM. That's how I got started in mainframes. I kind of stumbled forward. So I consider it an exciting, I don't know if you would call that a success, but it was quite successful for me.
Well, you must have left IBM at some point. And did you ever go back to the class? Did you pass the class?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I ended up doing quite well. I graduated with honors in college, and I think I was very shy of a 4.0 from, I can remember, I think I got one true false question wrong that kind of really rattled my grade. So hopefully my professor, I don't remember her name, but hopefully she's not going to listen to this and be like, I got that, gentleman.
Well, let me get this straight. Instead of working on punctuality, you said, to hell with it. I'm late. My professor said never go late without being prepared. So I'm going to the computer lab. Going to play around a little bit, have some fun.
Exactly. It's one of those things that almost sounds like a grand coincidence, like I had planned it, but it was completely unplanned, and it all kind of worked out in my favor, if you consider moving to Poughkeepsie, New York in my favor.
So you must have left. You're in Chicago now. Tell us the rest of the story, so to speak.
So the rest of the story goes that I was doing systems programming work for the engineering system test lab, and I loved the people that I was working with, but I had a terrible fear of flying. So anytime I had to use vacation time, I would drive back to the west side of Illinois. And if anyone's familiar with that drive from Poughkeepsie, New York to basically the Mississippi River, it was like a 16-hour drive. And if you did it all in one sitting, you were a disaster, at least for the next 2 days. So I spent all of my vacation time driving, visiting my family and friends in my hometown, and then driving back. And so I had to burn effectively 4 days just of road time to spend, a couple days with my family. So I got asked on LinkedIn to come do effectively the same systems programming job that I was doing in the Chicago area for a private company. And I decided that's perfect for me, moved back. And I worked there for about 9 years, and then I came to Ensono. I've been at Ensono now for almost 2 years.
Before we go further, you guys got to explain, what is an IBM Champion? Maybe the question is what is it to you? All right, Heather, you got to go first. I'm picking. All right, she's raising her hand.
But yes, what is a champion? A champion is how I got involved in is by accident, like everything in life, right? You just kind of do what you're passionate about, and then somebody sends you an email one day and says, by the way, I nominated you for this thing that's called an IBM Champion. And I'm like, what's that? And then I read, and then you got to get a couple of references and tell what you do for people. And I started reading it, and I'm like, well, this totally describes me. I love helping people. I love sharing insights. I have this rule that if I read a book, I got to share what I learned in that book with one other person. Otherwise, it's a waste of my time to read the book if it's just for me. So a champion
That's a good rule, by the way. Sorry to interrupt. Okay.
I like it. It works for me, right? So a champion, once I found this community, I was like, oh, crazy people like me. Like, I don't know about some of you guys that are listening to this, but are you ever feel like you're like, in your friend group, you're one of the top performers. You're kind of the person that everyone's like, God, how do they get so much done? And you're thinking, there's got to be other wackos like me that are sitting up all night reading books and doing all this crazy stuff. For no money, just because you were passionate about it, right? And then so when I found the IBM Champions, I was like, whoa, they're weirder than I am. These people are like playing at a whole nother level.
These guys are crazy people. I got it. Keep going.
Like, crazy, intelligent people that want to change the world. Like, I don't know about you, but my local friend group, they're not that kind of people. I wish they were. But I think that Jim Rohn was the first one that said, you are the average of the top 5 friends you spend the most time with.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just let that digest for a minute. And some of you are like, oh, shoot, ready. I need to level up my friend group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I hope your other friend group or one of them aren't listed, but that's all right. Keep going.
They're not in this world. They wouldn't.
They wouldn't pay attention. That's funny.
But yeah, I think it's an opportunity to find people that, one, you aspire to be more like them. You aspire and they inspire you to play at another level, to serve at another level. And at the end of the day, I think that's why we're all placed on this earth, is to serve and help other people. And that's what IBM Champions is all about.
Stephen, comments from you?
Yeah, well, I was actually driving home from Michigan yesterday, and I was remembering Heather's statement about the 5 people I spend the most time with, and I was driving with my wife and my daughter, and I was like, so I'm on this podcast tomorrow, and this guest is with me. I very much more accomplished than I'll probably ever be. And she had said something about the 5 most people you spend the most time with. And I was like, who are the 5 people I spend the most time with? I'm like, I don't even know if I know 5 people. And my wife was like, 2 of those people are in the car right now. She says, now you have to find 3 more. And I'm like, do I even know 5 people? But sorry, to get to your question now, the IBM Champions program, to me, I kind of got roped into it definitely more intentionally than Heather's story. I had heard about it, and when I came to Ensono almost 2 years ago, it was really this opportunity for me to challenge myself to be bigger than I thought I was, right? So when I was at my last job, I was a systems programmer, and that's what I did. I just did COS systems programmer work, and people I worked with were like, Steve knows his stuff. He really knows what he's doing, and he's always on the cutting edge of what's going on. And then when I came to Ensono, my leadership team here was basically like, we want you to kind of unleash yourself on mainframes in general. We want to see what the stuff you've been talking about, the things that you're really interested in, just kind of go crazy with it. And so I did. I've always been really a fanatic about just kind of working on things. And then I heard about the IBM Champions program. I don't quite recall where I heard about it, but then I was like, nobody knows who I am. No one's going to nominate me. So I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to nominate me. And I was like, is that even real? Like, can you do that? Should you do that? And I finally came to the conclusion that I was like, who cares? I'm just going to do whatever I want. I was really kind of decided that I'm going to challenge myself to be more than I am. So I'm just going to do it. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So I talked to some of my peers because I work with IBM in a lot of different engagements. And I said, I'm nominating myself for this. So if you think I'm valuable or useful, I would be honored if you would nominate me as well. And when it worked out, I was just completely surprised. And I think I've had just way too much fun with the program, honestly, just kind of doing all cool things, trying to build communities and contribute my knowledge to the overall industry. And it's just really neat to even be in the same orbit as Heather right now, just having read the different things that Heather's up to. It's just like I said earlier, I could only aspire to be as accomplished and awesome as I have witnessed Heather being.
Stephen, you must, I'm going to go out on a limb and say you're a little bit more humble than in that you've got to be like a rock star. So let's not be so humble. Tell us about your expertise in the mainframe. You know why you got selected. Tell us a little bit about that. Why the mainframe?
Okay, so the mainframe is a really fascinating place for me, and honestly, I try not to use the word mainframe so much, and that's simply because I find that a lot of people have a vision of what I'm talking about as soon as I say the word mainframe. They just immediately assume they know exactly what I'm talking about. And I would hazard that if people right now that aren't familiar with it, they're thinking of it, they're probably seeing in their heads just these huge rooms full of computers and people with like these gigantic tape reels. If you can't see me right now, but I'm holding my arms out at almost full width, these huge tape reels that they're mounting on these big machines that are spinning and whirring and making all these noises. Everyone's got big glasses and slicked over hair, and it's just this suit and tie engagement. And and I have found that mainframe technology, I'll call it Z systems, hopefully as much as I can, that technology is really a lot more than those images. And I think a big part of what I'm trying to do, like I said, I grew up kind of building computers and doing video game server stuff in the basement of my parents' house. And that idea of bringing that type of capability into the mainframe space has always just been absolutely fascinating to me. I felt like the mainframe space where it is right now is positioning itself to be connected to other systems, sharing this source of truth, and having even a semblance of knowledge of that past, of the distributed technology that I was interested as a child, and being able to kind of transition that into the way that I interact with enterprise systems. I think that's what would quantify me as this quote unquote rock star, because I just have that experience to build those bridges. Whereas a lot of my peers, people who are on the tail end of sunset years of their career, they didn't grow up with, Windows servers and Linux servers and playing around with those things. They kind of had to learn that as they were already professionals. So I kind of got a unique edge on that.
I'm going to get to you and Heather in just a moment, but I got one more question, Stephen. So as you kind of alluded to, there's a lot of folks out there that would say, oh, mainframes are legacy. How do you respond to that?
So I would say that anyone who's analyzing mainframes and considering them to be legacy are probably making hasty decisions or uninformed decisions, to be honest with you. I got to be careful with the words I say here. And that's because mainframes have historically and still continue to be on the cutting edge of technology, right? We're seeing AI inference engines being put into mainframes. We're seeing quantum computing on the cusp of mainframes. And these are things that are going to find themselves, in my opinion, in commodity hardware going forward. And it's all kind of got its genesis story in the mainframe world. So if you're interested in moving somewhere else, I really would caution you to understand what your objectives are. And then furthermore, understand if you can accomplish those objectives on the mainframe, because I would hazard to guess that you can, in fact, accomplish those objectives on the mainframe. And it's simply just a lack of information or a lack of understanding that's pushing you in these directions.
I think the challenge IBM has is we're the main pole in the tent of the mainframe. And there's a lot of people pulling at that pole, right? So that there leads to be a lot of FUD marketing by the competitors, whatever you want to call it. When I first took over the development of the database for the mainframe, I didn't know what I had, to be brutally honest with you at first. But you go in there and you look at the capabilities of what the mainframe, whether it's security, whether it's performance, whether it's high availability, you can go down the list. Pretty soon it's like unbelievable. I mean, it's almost akin to, the Wright brothers creating the first airplane, the Wright Flyer, flying it. And now we're talking about Elon Musk rockets, and we're saying, hey, these are legacy. Now we're talking complete state-of-the-art innovation, particularly for this century with the security challenges we have, et cetera. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing. But a lot of people don't see that because they buy into the FUD and they don't do the research that you mentioned.
I think that this kind of wraps into that point that you were making with Heather earlier, that you can almost make data kind of say anything you want it to, right? Especially when it comes to how available are these systems? How available are the alternatives to mainframes? How is the security of those devices? How can we make that data? You're seeing a lot of people that, even on both sides of the fence, I saw a report about mainframe growth, and the first thing I thought was like, who's presenting this data and what are they trying to say? Are they selling something? Are they trying to convince somebody to purchase some services, right? And that skepticism is really, really important to have when you're viewing those types of data sets.
One of my best, how do I say this? One of my best, I don't want to say it's a tactic because it's genuine in that a client will come to me and say, look, I want to get off the mainframe. I say, all right, let's do it. Because we got all kinds of technology. We do the research, we do the POCs, and then, you know where this is going. Inevitably they come back and say, yeah, I think we're going to stay on the mainframe. Yeah, I know you are. That's all right, because it's the best,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yeah, it's the best. What I told you was true to start with. Sometimes we just got to, go through the demos, the proof of concepts to see, what alternatives they had, and then they come to the realization that you and I are already at. Speaking of Heather, so you spend a lot of your time in providing, architecture decisions, innovations to different clients. Where are you at in all of this? I mean, what do you think? I mean, it doesn't have to be mainframe related. Where is the business today? Where do you think the biggest struggles are? And, where are your challenges?
So we recently did what we call a deep dive survey, and we surveyed CFOs and CIOs of companies we work with. And we asked them some of these questions. We're like, and from us, it's more of an analytics perspective, right? It's like, what is getting in the way? What roadblocks do you have to get greater momentum and leveraging data and analytics for success, right? And literally came down to two really, really dominant themes, with a third one closely trailing behind. And the first challenge they were having, and I think this is a challenge across the board today, is talent. Is finding people. And so I'm on this mission lately of helping our CIOs, CFOs to realize you can't hunt for people the way you used to. You want people like Steven that already have a job. Like, those are the people you want to hire. The champions are people you want to hire because they're going to
Don't
go
hire
up
Steven.
and beyond.
Just kidding.
And there's markers, success leaves clues. And there's markers to tell you what those people look like and where they hang out and that type of thing. But the second thing is time. Everyone was saying, due to being short-staffed and, with COVID and everything that's gone on, that they're struggling to find the time to really do the projects that are going to be game-changing. Right. And I think the third challenge that we see is kind of a people problem, is how we communicate with other areas of the business. So, for example, in technology, we tend to respect and honor the smartest person in the room, right? Like that, we don't care if they haven't showered in 6 days or like what. Like, we want smart people around us, right? And so when we in technology talk, we tend to throw out all our wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
But you go to other areas of the business, take marketing, take finance, take human resources, and you start throwing jargon at them, they feel stupid, they shut down, they're gone. And I think that if we can work on our communication skills and connecting more in the way, it's almost like someone that speaks Chinese and English, and you wonder why you can't understand each other, right? Like, it's that big of a gap that if we just solve that, all technology would go so much faster.
So it doesn't escape me that you're not even presenting technology problems. You presented, 3 problems that are talent, time, how to communicate. Are those, what percent are those? Like 80% of it in your mind, and then it becomes technology after that? What?
I think the question to ask yourself is, of the technology out there today, what percentage of that technology are corporations really leveraging? So I can speak from the Cognos side or the planning analytics side. They're not scratching the surface of the power and capabilities that IBM is giving them.
So is that a problem that needs to be solved? Is it a problem looking for a solution?
I think if we can get people to communicate and to better idea, I kept in my brain, every time Stephen was talking, I was thinking about we need to get away from the frequently asked questions into the should ask questions, right? Like, let's just shift everything. Stop asking, start telling people what they should be asking, because you could guide them. In fact, Al, you were talking about the path, the journey, where we have to take them through demo and then they say, oh, the mainframe rocks.
Yeah.
But why does that journey have to take so long?
So what questions should we be asking?
I think it depends on the situation and where the people are, the clients are, right? Like, I think every journey is unique, but they have a common destination. And the challenge is that it's like the Amazing Race. Like, everybody's going to have a little different experience, right?
Yeah, I would have a bad experience. It was an amazing race. Yeah. All right, Stephen is the expert in mainframe. What products are in your wheelhouse, Heather?
So I'm more on the Cognos, on the BI side. So delivering solutions in reporting to executives and business areas, as well as the planning analytics, which, by the way, is the best product IBM has. Just saying.
That's what we want our champions to say. That's perfectly okay.
It is the most flexible, dynamic tool, and every CFO needs it. I like to say the CFO, they have this unique role today. It's not just about the dollars and cents, but they have to understand technology and business and strategy with overseas and like everything. And planning analytics really lets them model that business so that they can predict what's coming and start to guide their organization instead of like floating down river bobbling like like a stick in the river. They actually can steer their organizations with planning analytics.
So Cognos, planning analytics, BI, essentially, that's your sweet spot?
That's my sweet spot.
Tell me the process, since you kind of mentioned of it, because yeah, you're right. We need to get time to value down to a minimum. What is your process, so to speak, then to do just that? I mean, how do you approach an engagement quickly, sell the value, and then go from there?
So I'm a big fan of facilitating workshops. I think one of the underrepresented skills in many corporations is the art of meeting facilitation. But getting the executives in the room, getting them to share the strategic goals so everyone knows what they are, they all agree, and then having them, literally, I have them take markers or Crayola crayons and start drawing what they envision the information they need to know. And once they start creating, especially with color, it like triggers something, and we eliminate this thing that a lot of technologists are challenged with, is that they think they know what the executives want, and the executives think they should know what they want. And like our crystal balls don't really work. I don't know about you, mine doesn't. I wish it did. But if we get them drawing and saying, this is what I need to run the business, now I can go back and work with the data team and go, okay, do we even have this data? Is this something we should start collecting now? Is this in a third-party source? Like, how do we get there? Like, work your way backwards, right?
How do you get to even that point of a workshop, though? How do you get their interest so they bite? I mean, it's like everybody's busy. You know what I find actually today, COVID has made it harder. Everybody started working from home. Hell, I got some companies that work strictly from home now. Now, if you want to get people together, it's a big event. It's like, hey, let's try to get everybody in this office, whatever. How do you do that? How do you create the event? Let's put it that way, to get people to say, all right, let's go to this workshop. I mean, how do you even get to that point?
It depends on the organization, right? So if they are an organization that the executives love in person and they made everyone come back to the office, you take one approach to that. Bringing in lunch is always a good idea. And then there's other teams that are completely virtual, as you say. The trick is understanding and having them see that value. and having them realize that they had a vision for themselves with their data initiatives and their analytics, and they're probably 4 or 5 years behind that vision.
Doesn't it all come back to data at the end of the day? Is that where you say, like, I'm paying attention here, and you talk about the trouble, the third item you had is how to communicate with other areas of the business. And a lot of that's with, you got the business side, you get the IT side. Some of them don't want to give access or democratize that data. That's their power. Some of it's because of, probably, good reasons around personal info, all that kind of good stuff. But doesn't it all come back to access to the data?
I look at data as the foundational layer of our house. Without it, we will crumble. If it has holes in it, gaps in it, missing big chunks, our house is going to crumble. But at the end of the day, you can build a foundation that if you don't build the rest of the house, it really is just a slab, right? It's not being utilized. So it's the symbiotic relationship between the data, your foundational layer, and the demands of the business. And we need to know that our foundation layer is flexible to either build our condo or our mansion or our little teepee hut, right? Like being able to be that flexible about the business needs and having that foundational layer to do it. But if you start just with the data, I've seen a lot of companies that have awesome data, but their executives don't know how to use it. They don't know it's there. And so it's not being leveraged properly. It's got to be the symbiotic relationship.
Stephen, that's your cue. You're Mr. Data. What trends are you seeing in the area of data? How do you set, or how would you recommend, given your experience, that a client set a foundation that's not built on sand, that's solid, so then the likes of Heather and create the reporting, the BI that they need?
Right. I think that what we're seeing, especially in the enterprise space, particularly in mainframe, ZOS is kind of my bread and butter. But what we're seeing is that people have a lot of heritage processes built around the collection and aggregation of data. A lot of really critical processes originate on mainframe systems, and they kind of stuff their data into the mainframe. And then you have people kind of looking left and right at one another and saying, how do we get this data so we can run things, analytics tools against it? How can we get this somewhere where someone can start digesting it and making cool visual pictures of it? And I think that the technology that we're seeing a lot of right now is about we're seeing a lot of technology that's, and I hesitate to use the word exfiltrating because that has a negative connotation. We're seeing people trying to migrate data out of the mainframe, put it somewhere, massage it in some interesting way, and then it just kind of sits there and it doesn't have the same consistency as it did on the platform. But we're also seeing what I find to be the most fascinating bits are people who are opening up the mainframe in secure ways to make that data available to these tools without having to tackle that eventual consistency problem, right? So if somebody manipulates the data over there, how do I get that to reflect back into my source of data? So the trends that I think that we are seeing most, and I'm seeing most personally, is people trying to move data somewhere else, and then they're trying to massage that data and then attack it with a lot of the tools that Heather is mentioning, and then derive some business value from that. And I think that what that is a bridge to success. I don't know that that's going to be the ultimate end game where we want to be all the time. I think that people would rather see connecting straight to the data, interacting with it, and then it just kind of stays where it is. The collection processes, they may not have been changed for several decades, and that's fine. If they work just fine, why fiddle with them, right? Let's leave them in place. Let them continue to collect data. Let them continue to generate data points, and let's let other processes kind of peer in a secure way, only extract the data that they necessarily need to derive insights, and go from there. So I think that's truly that democratization of data.
We actually call that the MacGyver approach, Stephen. So you guys know the TV show MacGyver? Like, he could get himself out of like the most precarious situation with a matchstick and a piece of bubble gum, right? So we actually coach our clients into when they don't know really what they want to ask of the data, to MacGyver it. Meaning, steal some data out of Stephen's system, plunk it over here, and TM1 is fabulous, or planning analytics is fabulous for that, because we kind of call it a poor man's data warehouse. So we can put it in there, we can get the executives to use it, ask questions of it, embrace it, and once they figure out what it is that they want, now we're going to go back to you and say, okay, where do you really have this data? Like, let's enterprise this. Let's make this, make this so that everybody can use it. But doing that little, as you say, the testing, we call that the MacGyvering, to kind of see what you even want and then go from there. And I think that approach really works well for clients.
So Heather, I know you have a book, Business Intelligent Bullseye. Am I correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And that mentions the MacGyver approach, does it not?
Correct. Yeah. It's a little storyline about like how people can go through and do this without spending years and decades and getting nowhere. I mean, that for me, as someone who's like wired to help people, is so frustrating to have a client going, next year we'll do it. And you're like, no, let's make it happen now.
I like the way you think.
You don't have to wait till next year.
But when you say this, so they can do this, what do you mean, just for clarity for the listeners, by this? They can do this. So
for me, it's sit down with a couple executives or managers or whoever it is you're trying to help leverage data. Have them sketch out their drawings, do a little workshop, very simple. I mean, this can be done in an afternoon. Then go back to the data tape. Where do we have this data? Do we have this data in some form that we can start to play with it? It's almost like a sandboxing approach, right? Start to interact with that data. Literally, we've had clients that we've sat down and done this, and within a couple weeks, they have dashboards in Cognos that they're playing with. Now, are they fully enterprise? Is the data coming the way we want to? No, not yet, not first phase. But once they figure out, because the struggle I have is a lot of executives don't know how they want to use our tools. Yeah, and guess what? They're using the wrong one. I like to say, it's like you have a 3-acre yard, out in Illinois, for example, and you got a weed whacker. And you're trying to mow it with a weed whacker when there's a beautiful John Deere tractor sitting in your garage.
That's funny. I don't know how to respond to that. That was pretty good. All right. I like it. I've got to believe that you both have a very strong level of social eminence. In other words, you're influencing part of the community as being that IBM champion. I got a question for another guest that has arrived in just a moment here. But before I ask her the question, we got all kinds of guests coming in today. I wanted to, where can folks reach you, and what should they be thinking about in terms of your engagement? In other words, if they're looking for X, come talk to me. They're looking for Y, come talk to me, and you can reach me here. Why don't you go first, Stephen?
So a lot of what I have been doing, and this is, I guess I have to tell a story before I tell kind of get to the punchline. As what I'm going to call it, I'm going to say it, as a millennial mainframer, it is challenging for me to feel like I have really been allowed access to my own quote unquote mainframe culture. Right. And when I say that, I'm thinking mostly about the people who brought me where I am, the shoulders of the giants that I stand upon. I think about those people, and those people had a whole culture that they got to experience that I haven't gotten an opportunity to experience that. They've had the data center antics, and for better or worse, they've lost a good portion of their hearing to impact printers. Right. They've got to play, throw the tape ring. They've been able to play throw the tape ring or wrap their colleagues up in perforated paper or whatever. And as silly as these examples might sound, that's the culture that they got to experience. They got to be a part of that. And so a lot of what I do is I'm not out wrapping people up or trying to harm people. What I'm trying to do is build places for people that are kind of like myself to interact and kind of experience their own culture. So I do that by creating things like I have a Discord channel. Discord is a chat program similar to Slack that people might know, but it's more open to people who may be non-professionals, people who may be students, may be enthusiasts or hobbyists in general, or retirees, for example, who want to interact with a mainframe community. So I'm building up these communities, and the community I've created is the Systems Z Enthusiast Discord. And I can definitely shoot a link out to that if you want to link out to that.
Yeah, please do, and I'll put that in the show notes.
Absolutely. So I am best found on that community. I'm seeing messages come across my phone as we're having this conversation in that community right now. And I could be found there. I could be found on LinkedIn. That's probably where I spend most of my time marketing myself, if you will. And then I do a lot of conference talks. But if you want to talk about what the modern mainframe looks like, what the innovation looks like happening on the mainframe today, then I would hope to be a great starting point for those types of conversations.
We can't have enough Millennium Mainframers. I even just like the name. That's fantastic.
I think that should be his tagline on
Yes.
LinkedIn.
I think you just found it.
Like, that's it. You've just got your nickname.
Man, this is the rocket ship going to Mars right now. And the rest of the millenniums need to get on it. You're already there. So good for you, man. Stephen, thank you. How about you, Heather?
Thank you.
So best way to get a hold of me and what I'm passionate about. So we obviously help organizations, people really leverage their investment in particular cognizant planning analytics. But more than that, we are trying to help our technologists become more influential, to learn how to do better requirements discovery, how to get executives excited and funding your projects, right? Like all the kind of, I don't have a cool name like Stephen does, like the Millennium Mainframer, but what we're trying to do, and we used to joke about this, but I can say this because I'm a nerd, we're trying to socialize the nerds so that we can uprise and be more influential at the executive levels and really help transform organizations to leverage data in ways that they can't even imagine doing today.
Very well. Where can folks reach you? Where's the best place to get you?
LinkedIn is probably the best. And so if you're Googling me, please put an L in the middle, Heather L. Cole. There's another Heather Cole in Tampa. Let's just say she's a different reputation than I do.
Real great. But I told folks a minute ago, I'm coming back to it, that we had a surprise guest, Libby Ingrassia. She is the IBM Champions lead here at IBM. And look, I wanted to bring you on, Libby, to have a quick chat with our fellow guests, Stephen and Heather. And I'm going to put you on the spot with the first question and say, look, so you tell me, I probably unfairly had them explain why they are champions. You tell me why they're champions.
You know what? I think it's entirely fair for you to have them explain it. And I think in most ways, they're right. At its base, the IBM Champions Program is intended to recognize people in the larger IBM technology community who are experts, who are also advocates for our IBM products, technology, communities. And these two are perfect examples of that. Heather's the lifetime champion who's, been around for a while doing these things and just sharing her knowledge and expertise, even back into IBM, teaching us how to do things with our products and sell them and be amazing. And kind of at the other end of the career, bringing in all the new people to, be excited about IBM Z systems. We've got Stephen, who just decided to jump in and raise his hand. It's all about the hand raisers.
Very good. Very good. Anything else you want to say about the program itself since I have you on? And also, I'd like to hear a little about your history and experience before before we go?
Oh my goodness. Well, I'll talk about the program first. So right now we're actually in the
Okay.
nominations period. So Heather talked about the 5 people you spend the most time with. And while I don't think my champions get to spend the most time with the other champions, one of the biggest benefits that they talk about is being connected to these nearly 800 other experts and advocates and thought leaders and just amazing human beings around the globe at all different kinds of companies. And so this is folks' opportunity to be that hand raiser and to nominate themselves or to say thank you to someone in the community who has been who has helped them, who they've learned from, and they can nominate them as a way to recognize them and say thank you. So that's open till the end of November. We've just extended the deadline.
And a little bit about yourself, Libby.
Oh my gosh. Well, like Heather,
You can't come in here and not talk about yourself for just a little bit.
well, like Heather said, if I really started at the beginning, it would be all kinds of convoluted. I have this entirely nonlinear career where, I graduate with degrees in English and history, but my first job is doing tech writing where, get this, you might be too young, Stephen, but I'm going to hope some of the other people can remember back this far. You remember the laptops that were about 45 pounds that basically were a giant box that you had to like really show those biceps? I did the documentation for some early road warriors using what was then Lotus Notes on those giant laptops. And that started my whole technology career. I went from documenting it and being the tech writer and editor to being the trainer who taught people how to use it to being the consultant who implemented it at all kinds of places. And then I was the magazine editor who had people write about it. And then I've come full circle to now help other people do all of those same things.
Thank you for that. If I'm a listener, I'm out there and I say, well, I want to become an IBM champion. I can do this. Where should they go?
IBM.com/champion, CHAMPION.
Do they get a personal white glove service anyway? How do they get to Libby?
You know what? They do get the personal white glove service if they want it. That's kind of the whole point of the IBM Champions program. Once they either nominate someone else or themselves through that URL, that IBM.com/champion, they'll get, okay, it's automated, I admit it, but it does come from me, an email that says, thank you so much. Here's what it all means. And then if they want to, they can reach out to me. There's a link on the site that emails yours truly directly, and I will email back. Of course, I'm on LinkedIn and all those places as well, but email is best.
And lastly, once you become an IBM champion, do you have to recertify? Is it indefinite? And what kind of other goodies do you get as part of that nomination or that selection?
So it is an annual renomination process, because what we're looking at for those experts and advocates is what they've contributed to the community over the last 12 months. So you don't just get to rest on your expertise laurels. You have to continue to build community, share content, help other people learn, answer questions. Whatever it is that you do, you have to continue to do it. And then we look at those nominations and renewals each year around this time. Now, that's true for everybody except people like Heather. Heather has contributed so much over a consistent period of time, consistent and beyond consistent, exceptional contributions, that she's a lifetime champion. So Heather, instead of spending the time renominating herself, gets to help mentor other people and help them become champions, help them be great at being champions once they are. And then in terms of benefits of being a champion, so once you become a champion, you're in the program for the year. We give you lots of opportunities to learn. So we have monthly calls, and what we try to do is curate some folks to come on those calls and briefings that will tell you what's coming with IBM before anybody else knows it, that will tell you sort of the inside scoop, make you feel like part of the team. We try to get executives to come talk to them. So, they're getting the chance to talk to you today, Al, but don't imagine that I'm not going to be on your doorstep a couple months from now saying, hey, Al, come talk to all the champions. Executives come in and, give a briefing, talk, meet, get feedback. And that's probably one of the biggest benefits. We also do things special at IBM events. We do try to give them some swag to, use and wear and start conversations with. They get a digital badge every year. Mostly things like that.
Very good. Thank you, Libby. I mean, look, for the listeners, not much of an advertisement. I'm not advertising. I'm learning here myself. I just like to surround myself with champions.
Well, I tell everybody,
because they're super smart.
Right? I tell everybody I have the best job at IBM because I work with these 800 super smart, amazing, giving people. And every day I come in and I get talk to 5 champions. Oh, okay. Now I'm excited to do my job today. It's wonderful.
I know I'm going to be respectful of time, but I got one more then. Is there any requirement to give back to the community? Is that part of the selection criteria as well?
So in general, yes, we expect that what the advocacy is about giving back to the community. Some people do different kinds of advocacy, right? Some people are folks who help IBM in a more direct way. They're expert users on sales calls, or they do case studies and customer references and things like that. But a huge portion of our champions consistently answer questions in the community, write blogs or books, or do webinars, or put in feedback for future product updates, whatever it is. That consistent giving back to the community is something that we encourage constantly.
Fantastic. And my last question, I promise. Thank you, Libby, so much. Heather, you're from Chicago too, I understand. You live in Tampa, you're in Chicago now?
I grew up in St. Charles, right near where Stephen went to college.
So, in Stephen, you're Chicago. We know that. We've already established it.
Yep.
So is it Cubs or White Sox between you guys?
That's not even a question. It's only Cubs.
Is that true, Stephen? Only Cubs?
All right, so I guess I have to out myself as not the hugest sports fan, but I will say that for me, it depends. Do I want the nacho helmet or do I want the ice cream helmet, right? So if you think Comiskey has the ice cream helmet, you can go get the Sox helmet full of ice cream, or you can go to the Cubs and get the nacho helmet. So it really depends on that for me. We love going to the games. They're real local. We're more local to the Cubs. We're more local to Wrigley than we are Comiskey, but sometimes those Sox tickets are just so darn cheap that it doesn't even matter.
So you can tell that Stephen grew up way far outside of Chicago.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
In Chicago, if you're a fair weather fan and choose both teams, you're not a true Chicagoan.
Yeah, well,
I just love how he can
see.
over-engineer that that choice, right? He engineered it. He got some logic behind it. All comes back to the belly.
Is this
like
where
it.
I break in
Very
and say
good.
go Astros because I live in Houston and I'm an Astros fan and we are just post World Series win number 2?
We'll let you have
Thank
it
you.
this time, Libby.
All good. Hey, Stephen, thank you. Heather, thank you. Libby,
Thank you.
I appreciate you being
Thanks
here
so
as
much,
well.
Al.
Very good. Hey, listeners, I always appreciate you. As always, hit us on almartintalksdata@gmail.com. Love to hear from you. Until next time, we'll see you on the podcast. Thank you all. Bye-bye.